Hello everybody and welcome to my deeper look into Veigar guide. First couple things before we get right into it, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about my background with Veigar. Current experience right now is I'm playing him kind of in Diamond 5, Diamond 4. He is my most played champion with over 300,000 mastery points. He's definitely one of my most favorite just because he has such large spikes of damage that just can really catch the enemy off guard with that ult and with the late game W. Now, if you haven't seen my basic guide to Veigar and you're a little bit more of a beginner, maybe you're in gold or silver or bronze, I definitely recommend giving that one a look before going into this one, where we're going to do a little bit more refined points. So I'm going to put a link to that in the comments section. So what I have planned for us right now is we're going to go over some of his laning mechanics, some of his power spikes, some tips and tricks that I found along the way climbing with him, and some matchups you really need to look out for with Veigar. Alright, now diving right into Veigar's laning. It is definitely one of the hardest parts of the game for Veigar because he is really one of the weakest champions in the early game. He's very low base HP, he has very low damage, he is kind of just a really poor kit for the early game, similar to Nasus, how vulnerable he is with his limited mobility and defensives, that he really needs to be careful when he is laning. So let's go over some of the aspects of his laning. So pre-6, Veigar is just really, he's a glorified cannon minion. That's all he really is. He can give really good gank assist with his E. He can do a little bit of damage if you hit the Q and W, but he is really weak before you're getting those stacks. So what you really want to focus on with Veigar is getting those stacks. So you have to treat it a bit like Nasus. You want to have as much mana as you can get in the early game, so I definitely recommend rushing one of the mana items, whether it be Seraphs for a little bit more defensives, Ludens if you want a little bit more kill pressure and wave clear, or GOP if you want to get a little bit more catch thrown in there. So some of the strengths he has in laning phase: he does have a fairly large range with his Q and his W, that he can outrange some of the mid-range champions that you see. He also has a really big spike at level 6 where he's able to do a ton of damage to low HP targets. His poke can be very good. You just need to get used to the timings on how long it takes for the W to drop, and just kind of look at their play patterns, and if they're going up for CS, just throw a W where they're going to throw that last hit out from, and try and either deny him with the W where he's going to miss the CS, or he's going to take the hit of the W, which is going to give you a stack, and he's going to get the CS. So really just try and punish him at any point. Don't give them any free CS when you're with Veigar if you have the advantage of range. Now, some of the weaknesses Veigar has in laning phases: he is super weak to assassins that are like Fizz, that have the mobility to get out of his E cage before it is placed, or to go invulnerable to jump over the walls, which makes Fizz pretty deadly. Another weakness is poke. People that outrange him, things like Xerath or Vel'Koz, can be really effective against Veigar in laning phase, kind of pushing him out. Veigar also struggles pretty hard last hitting under tower. You really have to be prepping the minions if you're getting pushed in with the 1 autos on the backcasters, and just making sure that it's just 1 auto on those front melee minions. So what you really want to focus on getting is the mana items and the CDR items for your laning. So the tome that gives mana, I'm kind of blanking on it right now, but it is very good. Lost Chapter, there we go, where it's going to give you CDR and it's going to give you mana on level up. So that is really the key to getting out of laning phase. You do have a bit of kill pressure on squishier targets that you are CCing, so just really look to kind of poke them out and maybe surprise them with a flash ult, or just kind of suss it out and try and be a bit aggressive if you have that advantage. Just try and push where you can, but don't be too overly aggressive, as your power spikes will come in. There's no reason to make huge plays that are 50-50 when you know you're going to outscale pretty much any other champion in the game. All right, and that will wrap up Veigar's laning phase. All right, and let's go over some of Veigar's power spikes. First, let's go over the one power spike before his level 6, in my opinion, is the level 3. When you get all 3 of your abilities and your E is able to set up your other 2 damaging abilities, it can be very effective with that all-in trade. He's either going to be trying to run out of your E and hopefully getting caught on the walls, and then you're going to be able to throw your WQ for guaranteed hits, or he's going to be trying to run around inside of your cage without getting hit by any of the abilities. And here I just recommend just throwing him in the middle, or maybe crowding him a bit, running up to the cage a little bit, forcing him farther back in the cage because he is looking to kind of dodge the abilities. So just throw him kind of in the middle of the back of the cage, because people generally are going to be in the middle. They're going to stay away from those edges. All right, and then we have the obvious power spike of level 6 for Veigar, where he has a massive amount of burst damage. So this is when I recommend that you look for a roam bottom. You try and push out the wave if you're able to, and look for that roam, because they're going to be level 3, level 4, depending on how quickly you're leveling up and how much CS you're getting. So your level 6 damage on those low level targets can just be massive. So this is a great time to look for the roam and kind of try and help you out of that really tough early game that Veigar experiences. Another great power spike for Veigar is when he gets his first mana item, because he's able to start really pushing out the lane and not getting pushed under tower constantly, where you're throwing out your W on the back minions and able to either one-shot him with an auto, or maybe two-shot him with the WQ combo. Another really strong power spike with Veigar is his Rabadons. That just adds so much damage because it compounds the effectiveness of your passive, and it is a really strong point for Veigar to have maybe that Ludens into Rabadons, where he has like 500 or 600 AP depending on your passive. Another really big power spike in the late game that you can really look for is when your W is maxed and you have a good amount of stacks, where you have a very low CDR on your W and you can just be spamming that. So always be looking to keep your W on cooldown in team fights, because it is going to be relatively short in the late game at about, I don't know, 2 seconds, depending on the stacks, of course. And obviously, this is when Veigar just starts taking over games in the late game, so look to press your advantage. Don't be too far back. Just kill the target that is the strongest on the enemy team, and just carry from there, because Veigar is an amazing champ right now in the meta, that he can be a really strong late game carry. Alright, and let's go over some tips and tricks that I've learned on the way climbing with Veigar. So first off, I would like to talk about one of my favorite skins for Veigar, this one and Final Boss, is the Omega Squadron skin. It is very effective because the W is a bit harder to see. It just gives that small red reticule on the ground, and it is very easily masked by either large champion models or a lot of animations going on team fights. So I don't know if this might be the placebo effect, but I find that I land a lot more W's in team fights with the Omega Squadron. Some people, other Veigar players, have agreed with me in this, and I think you should really try it out for yourself, because it is the most minimalist warning for your enemies if you throw down that W with the Omega Squadron skin. Alright, and another tip that I would like to go over is he is very effective into certain champions that spawn minions, because you are able to stack off things like Malzahar and things like Heimerdinger. So always look for those champions, and if you see that, just lock in a Veigar against it. It's going to be really effective, because neither of those champions are too rough for Veigar, and he can get a lot of free stacks with that. Right, and let's go over some team fighting, which can be a pretty difficult thing to learn. It can really hurt you if you're trying to climb with Veigar and you're not team fighting effectively. Now, you need to stay at a good range, just because he has decent range himself, and he is very susceptible to burst damage. So kind of a base line I would give any player that's looking to pick up Veigar is stay at the max range of your W away from their carries, and look to use your E stun on their front line. and that would be kind of, you really want to use your E stun when they're using their mobility abilities to get to you. So things like the Arctic Assault from Sejuani, things from like Talon using his ult for movement speed, things like Kha'Zix jumping into you, or things like Kayn going through the wall and trying to get to you. Now, another thing that I found out with Veigar is you really should be, your build should be pretty diverse. I know I'm not the best at this, but it can be very good to kind of temper your builds. If they have a lot of burst, you should really be looking into getting a bit more defensive items, because one thing Veigar does not lack in the late game is damage. He lacks a amount of just survivability in team fights, so one defensive item or two defensive items can really make a difference, whether it be something like Frozen Heart or Zhonya's, or I don't know, even a dead man's plate, or a Righteous Glory to help with your picks with your E. It can really be the difference between a won and a lost game, because in the late game, usually those fights are decided if you're getting picked or you're just destroying their whole team with one W or one ult. All right, and the importance of one thing in the late game is your W is just such an important skill to keep on cooldown, because it has such a short cooldown and it does just massive amounts of damage. So you should be throwing those out constantly in the late game team fights. Don't be looking for that perfect setup with your E cage into your WQ. You should be throwing out your Ws as often as possible, because it can be a very it can make a huge difference in team fights. Just give it a try. Just keep that W on cooldown and kind of use your QR, because that's going to be enough to burst out a squishy, but use your W just kind of as your consistent damage you're throwing out on the tanks. All right, and one thing, kind of a little guide that I do in or a little game I do in Champion Select with Veigar is, if they have 3 champions that are either a poke or assassin, I just simply do not pick Veigar into that team comp, because it will really cause you to struggle. For example, if they have a mid lane Xerath, which is very strong into Veigar, and then they have an assassin in the jungle, and then they have something like Riven, a high mobility carry in the top lane, it can really makes Veigar struggle, because he just doesn't have the defensive to deal with those 3 in combination. 2 is kind of pushing it. 1, it's all right. You can run Veigar into just 1 poker assassin, obviously, but when it's just compounded by the 3 different champions, it can really be a struggle, because Veigar thrives in the front to back team fights, and these poke assassin type champions are they kind of work around it. They use their mobility to get past your front line, or they use their poke to just simply bypass your front line and deal damage to you. So just be careful running into Veigar into those kind of team comps. All right, and that will wrap up my tips and tricks for Veigar. All right, and let's jump into some Veigar matchups that you should really look out for in the mid lane. Let's start off with some very good ones that you definitely should be bringing Veigar into. That first one being Azir. Veigar currently has a 60% win rate into Azir. First of all, it's because he doesn't really have to get close to do damage, so the Azir ult can only be used super offensively against Veigar, and you outrange Azir, and you're able to burst him very hard. So Veigar is definitely just a massive pick into Azir, because it's getting a bit more common now in the higher elos. Really good Azir players can make a difference, but you can really shut down an Azir player with your E cage, because it stops his dashes and you're able to burst him out, so it's really good. Another matchup that Veigar surprisingly does really well into is Galio, because he is able to get a very easy laning phase. You're able to just stack up constantly. You're able to get a lot of free harass. You're able to get a lot of passive stacks off hitting him, because he's a very large champion model, and he is usually meleeing minions, so he's pretty predictable in where he's going to be. Another pick that Veigar is really good into is Ryze, just because you outrange him. He has very predictable damage and a playstyle where he has to stay in that mid-range to do damage. So he's kind of in that perfect range away from you where you're able to do a lot of damage to him, where he has to kind of run up to you to do his burst. So just kind of like auto space him, just keep him away from his range of damage and stay in your range of damage on him, and you should perform extremely well against him. Some of the extremely tough matchups now that I really wouldn't recommend taking Veigar into is Xerath. He is able to basically, in the mid to late game, he's able to kill you at your range of damage with just simply if he lands an E, you're dead. If he lands maybe a QW into hitting his ults on you, you're definitely dead. So watch out for Xerath. He's really squishy though, so you can burst him out, but Veigar does right now, he only has a 45% win rate into Xerath, so that's a pretty pronounced percentage. So you just be very careful running it into Xerath. Another matchup that's pretty difficult for Veigar is the Morgana, because she has so much pick with you onto you with her Q long range. She outranges your QW damage by a bit with her Q, and she is able to black shield the person you're trying to pick off in team fights. Now in the super late game, she lacks a bit of damage just because of her abilities are extremely long cooldown, and with the current meta right now, though, games are going by pretty quick, so Morgana is usually a very good pick into the Veigar. And Veigar currently has a 43% win rate into Morgana, so just be careful picking the Veigar into that matchup. And in team fights, just try and cage multiple enemies, or else she's just going to black shield the one person that you're caging, and it can really just counter your whole kit and what you're trying to do in team fights. All right, and last up in the matchups is that freaking fish, the Fizz. He is a good Fizz player, can really wreck Veigar and what he's trying to do, because he can just do his troll pull over your E stun. He has a lot of burst damage. He can kill you pretty much at level 6 and on. So he is a very tough matchup, because he can either save his troll pull for your ult or to get over your E, and usually I don't know. I don't know about you guys. If you found a way to deal with the Fizz really easily, let me know in the comments below. But I struggle a lot with a really talented Fizz player in mid diamond right now, and it is a very strong counter matchup to Veigar. It currently has a 46. You currently have a 46% win rate going into Fizz. So just be careful blind picking Veigar sometimes, because there are some pretty well-known counters into him, and those kind of 3 archetypes can really screw up Veigar and what he is trying to do in the game. Alright, and that will wrap up my deeper look into Veigar guide. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for all the support recently. Got over that 100 subscriber mark, which is pretty cool, and I've been talking to you guys a lot in the comments section, so I am always open to feedback and critique on my videos. I'm really trying to get better with kind of just the overall quality and the editing process. So please let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. And that will wrap it up, guys. Just thank you so much again. It's been really cool talking to you guys in the comments section. And as always, take it easy.